Welcome back, everyone, as we continue our deep dive into the story of Napoleon's Marshals. We are into the top 10 now, and if you have not seen the series to this point of my reactions as we break down these fantastic videos from epic history, a link is in the description that will take you back all the way to episode 1. You can get caught up. We are on to number 9. The link is in the description to that original content as well. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive in to this first one.
9. Marshall Bessieres.
High praise there. If I'd had Bessieres with me at Waterloo, my guard would have brought me victory. Wouldn't have mattered a whole lot.
Jean-Baptiste Bessieres was the son of a surgeon with a relatively prosperous upbringing in southwestern France. When the French Revolution began, he volunteered for the National Guard and was sent to Paris to join the King's Constitutional Guard, along with his old school friend Joachim Murat. This unit was soon disbanded, but Bessieres remained in Paris and was among the soldiers defending the Tuileries Palace when it was stormed by the mob on the 10th of August 1792.
This is interesting because unlike a lot of these guys, he's got a very specific role in defending the monarchy at the start of the revolution.
In the aftermath, he needed to get out of Paris in a hurry, so he volunteered to fight on the Pyrenees front. His bravery and good sense won him a commission in the 22nd Chasseurs, and he distinguished himself at the Battle of Boulou. Transferred to Italy, his friendship with Murat got him noticed by the army commander, General Bonaparte, who was impressed enough to make him commander of his new bodyguard, known as Les Guides de Bonaparte. Bessieres distinguished himself as a cavalry commander in Italy, and later Egypt, winning promotion to brigadier and loyally supporting Napoleon at every turn. He became one of the few men that Napoleon regarded as a true friend.
And those are hard to come by when you're a person who's on the rise and gaining title after title and position after position and more power. A lot of people hitch their wagons to you just so you can pull them along with them. So it's difficult to find people that you can really trust and that you can really consider a friend.
When Napoleon became first consul of France in 1799, he rewarded Bessieres with command of the elite Consular Guard cavalry, which he led with devastating effect at Marengo the next year. In 1804, Bessieres became a marshal, less for any great military achievement than for being a loyal member of Napoleon's inner circle. Bessieres himself was well-liked, kind, well-mannered and generous, a pious Catholic and social conservative who liked to powder his hair in the old style. His young wife, Marie-Jeanne, was also a favourite at court, doted on by Napoleon and Empress Josephine. In 1805, Bessieres commanded the Imperial Guard. In December that year, at the Battle of Austerlitz, he played a crucial role repelling the Russian Guard at the battle's climax. At Eylau in 1807, his squadrons supported Murat's mass cavalry charge and made their own disciplined attacks to cover his withdrawal.
So the one tricky thing for him, of course, is that there's a limited number of powerful and influential cavalry positions out there, and with Murat having one of those already, it's difficult for Bessieres to make a name for himself other than through his close connection to Napoleon.
However, Bessieres' opportunities for glory were limited. Napoleon always held the Guard back as his last reserve, as at Friedland. In 1808, Bessieres received his first major independent command in northern Spain.
Not in Spain!
That May, the country erupted in revolt against the French.
You know, we've talked a lot about timing and about how people came to the right place at the right time and that gave them a chance for advancement. Well, if you're Bessieres and you want your opportunity for independent command or for high command, you don't want that first opportunity to be in Spain.
Bessieres reacted quickly and decisively, securing key towns and roads. He then attacked Spanish forces at Medina de Rioseco, winning a crushing victory against an enemy that outnumbered him 2-1.
Impressive.
But once the immediate crisis had passed, he hesitated and failed to exploit his victory. When Napoleon arrived in Spain, Bessieres was given command of the reserve cavalry, a role he retained for the war against Austria in 1809. In May, Bessieres and his cavalry were among the first across the Danube, with Massena occupying the village of Aspern on his left and Lannes holding Essling on the right. When the Austrian commander, Archduke Charles, launched a massive and unexpected counterattack, Bessieres, outnumbered 4-1, made a series of desperate charges, helping to save the army from disaster.
Going on the offensive when you're outnumbered 4-1, that's gutsy, but sometimes it's what you got to do.
It came at a high cost. Bessieres and his cavalry performed bravely. But that night, a long-running feud with Marshal Lannes nearly came to blows when Lannes accused Bessieres of hanging back. The matter went no further, as Lannes was fatally wounded the next day. Bessieres commanded the cavalry again at Wagram, leading a major attack to cover Massena's redeployment to the left wing. As the charge began, a cannonball killed Bessieres' horse and injured his leg. A rumour reached the Imperial Guard that Bessieres was dead. Some old veterans began to weep for their old commander, until they were assured he was only wounded.
You know, in the chaos of battle, these kinds of things happen. You know, somebody is out on the battlefield, they see Bessieres go down, they see his horse take a shot, they see him get hit, and they don't see him move afterwards, and they say, oh my gosh, he's been killed, and nobody knows any different. And so by the time they find out the truth in the chaos of battle...
That was quite a cannonball, Napoleon told Bessieres. It reduced my guard to tears. As a devout Catholic, Bessieres was critical of Napoleon's divorce from Empress Josephine, leading to a short spell out of favour.
Divorce with Josephine was purely about an heir. He still loved Josephine. All indications seem to be that despite their infidelity at times, they did truly love each other. But she's older than him. She's not able to have any more children, even though she had children from her first husband. So by the time you get to 1810, Napoleon's been emperor. He's thinking about the next generation, producing an heir. He's had illegitimate children. So I don't know if he's had them at this point or not, but we know he had illegitimate children. So he was able to have children. He ends up marrying an Austrian princess to have a child with her.
In 1811, he was sent back to Spain to command the Army of the North. He found an impossible situation: a widespread insurgency and insufficient troops and supplies. He wrote bluntly to Napoleon, stating that the French must give up territory, something the Emperor would never allow.
But he was right. 100% right.
For all his piety and refined manners, Bessieres ordered his share of executions and reprisals in his attempt to pacify northern Spain.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, plenty of deaths caused by the Catholic Church in Spain, too. So I don't see these... I'm guessing he didn't see these two things as incompatible.
Brutal methods used by many French commanders in this conflict. Later that year, he joined forces with Marshall Massena's Army of Portugal to take on Wellington's army at the Battle of Fuentes de Oñoro, but was widely blamed for refusing to send in his cavalry to support Massena's attacks. Unfortunately for Napoleon, this was typical of how many marshals behaved in his absence. They'd rather watch another marshal fail than help them to win all the glory. In 1812, Bessieres accompanied Napoleon into Russia, commanding his Guard cavalry. Since the Guard was kept in reserve, he saw little action until the retreat, when he led the advance guard, clearing a path for the survivors. The disaster in Russia left Bessieres severely demoralized, but
probably left most people severely demoralized.
He was resolved to do his duty, now serving once more as Napoleon's cavalry commander in Marshal Murat's absence. On the 1st of May 1813, Bessieres was scouting enemy positions before the Battle of Lützen, when a cannonball hit him in the chest, killing him instantly.
Yeah, I bet so. I mean, most of the artillery you're dealing with at this point, they're small, but it's solid shot. And you get hit by a 6-pound ball from a cannon in the chest, especially if it's directly in the chest, there's no way you're surviving that if it's a direct shot. It could be devastatingly effective, especially at close range, firing through multiple ranks of men. And it's a tough way to go, man.
His death robbed Napoleon of a dependable commander and one of his last remaining friends. It is surely a great loss for you and your children, Napoleon wrote to his widow, but an even greater one for me.
I know he meant that as a compliment, but I'm not entirely sure how I would have taken that as Madame Bessieres. Yeah, I think his children and widow maybe would argue that it was a greater loss for them, but I get why Napoleon said it that way. Now we're on to the Scotsman.
8.
Well, half Scottish.
Marshall Macdonald.
Good and brave, but unlucky. Sometimes it happens.
Jacques Macdonald's father was a Scotsman who'd supported Bonnie Prince Charlie's bid to seize the British throne in 1745.
So this is the uprising that ends up being defeated at the Battle of Culloden right outside of Inverness. Got to go to that battlefield about a month ago. They are the rightful heirs to, at this point, what is the throne of Great Britain. The Act of Union has made Scotland and England into a single kingdom under one crown. And they were all bypassed because they were Catholic. And so there was a law that was passed that barred any Catholic from inheriting the throne, since you'd be the head of the Church of England, which wasn't Catholic at that point. So Bonnie Prince Charlie is he's fighting on behalf of his father, who's still alive, but then eventually claiming the throne for himself. And if you follow that line down, the current heir on the Jacobite claimant to the throne is the, I think, 90-year-old Duke of Bavaria. And then actually, in another generation or two, the Jacobite claimant will be the guy who's going to inherit the throne of Liechtenstein. So he would be, theoretically speaking, of course, heir to the crown of the United Kingdom and Liechtenstein and Bavaria, all under one crown. But fascinating story in and of itself.
After this ended in defeat at Culloden, the family fled to France. Inspired by tales of the Trojan War, Macdonald chose a military life and became a lieutenant in Dillon's Irish Regiment, a French unit made up mostly of Irish émigrés. In the Revolutionary Wars, he won a reputation as a hard-working, intelligent and brave officer, and served as aide-de-camp to General Dumouriez, commanding the Army of the North. He distinguished himself in that general's famous victory at Jemappes, paving the way for rapid promotion from lieutenant to general in just 2 years. He led his division well during campaigns in Holland and Germany, and formed a close bond with one of France's most successful commanders of this period, General Moreau.
It's always a combination of factors, right? We've talked about luck, we've talked about the right opportunity happening at the right time based on the circumstances. It's also about connections. It's also about performance. It's and luck, as Napoleon mentions about Macdonald. It's so many factors.
In 1798, he was sent to Rome as governor, and later commanded the army of Naples. Summoned north the following year to reinforce Moreau's army of Italy, he was nearly killed in a skirmish with Austrian cavalry, and while still suffering from his wounds, his army was defeated at the Trebia by a larger coalition force commanded by the great Russian general Suvorov. But Macdonald's own conduct won approval from General Bonaparte, among others. Later that year, he assisted Napoleon's seizure of power in the coup of 18 Brumaire, ensuring the loyalty of the troops at Versailles. He was rewarded with an army command in Switzerland, and that winter led his men through the Alps to attack the Austrians in Italy.
So he is, compared to a lot of these marshals, at a pretty high level of command pretty early on. Late 1790s, already commanding his own army.
His march was far more challenging and dangerous than Napoleon's, but was never immortalized in quite the same way.
Of course not. He's not Napoleon.
In 1804, Macdonald's former commander, General Moreau, was arrested and charged with involvement in a plot to assassinate Napoleon. Macdonald stood up for his friend's reputation, an act of loyalty typical of the man, but disastrous for his career. Moreau was exiled. Macdonald was placed under police surveillance and retired to his country estate in disgrace.
Not done yet, though.
5 years passed before Napoleon, desperate for experienced senior commanders, asked him to serve as military advisor to his 27-year-old stepson, Prince Eugene, now commanding the army of Italy.
And we've talked before about Eugene. He's one of those rare examples of nepotism that pays off. He's a decent commanding officer. He's not to the level of some of these other guys, but considering the fact that he was Napoleon's stepson, it could have been a lot worse.
Macdonald and Eugene worked well together, driving back the Austrians, and by an awesome feat of marching, joined Napoleon near Vienna in time for the Battle of Wagram. The second day of the battle was Macdonald's moment. Entrusted by the Emperor with the main attack on the enemy centre.
I was just about to say that putting him with Eugene, these are two guys that obviously Napoleon is relying heavily on, and he feels like he can trust. And this is an opportunity to show that trust, and is well founded, and say, you've put your trust in me, you've given me this opportunity, I'm going to show you what I can do.
He formed his troops into a giant, open-backed square, and advanced into a hail of fire. Napoleon, watching through his telescope, exclaimed several times, "What a brave man! What a brave man!" Macdonald's costly attack helped to secure a great victory. The next day, Napoleon went to find him on the battlefield and greeted him with the words, "Let us be friends from now. You have acted valiantly and given me the greatest services."
That's the confirmation of this trust was well founded. You were in exile. You've been given another opportunity, and you've demonstrated that you were worthy of that opportunity.
On the battlefield of your glory,
wow,
where I owe you so large a part of yesterday's success, I make you a Marshal of France. You have long deserved it.
On the battlefield.
In addition, Macdonald received the title Duke of Taranto and a large pension. But as time would prove, his loyalty remained to France, not to Napoleon. Macdonald spent an unhappy year in Catalonia, commanding troops in what he regarded as an immoral war. In his memoirs, he even praised the noble and courageous resistance of the Spanish. In 1812, he was given command of 10th Corps for the invasion of Russia. This corps, composed of German troops and reluctant Prussian allies, guarded the left flank of the invasion and had a relatively quiet campaign. In December, the Prussians suddenly agreed an armistice with the Russians, leaving the loyal remnants of Macdonald's corps to fight their way back to Poland.
So it's interesting that the last several marshals we've talked about all kind of had a back seat. Well, I shouldn't say a back seat in the Russian campaign, but none of them were in the main army advancing on Moscow. They were all kind of guarding the flanks. They were, dealing with the fighting retreat afterward, but none of them were in the main advance.
By 1813, Napoleon relied on Macdonald as one of his senior marshals. In August, he gave him command of the forces keeping watch on General Blücher's army of Silesia. But when Macdonald advanced across the Katzbach River, torrential rain and flooding caused chaos among his troops.
You can plan for everything, you can't account for the weather sometimes.
Just as they encountered Blücher's army. Blücher launched an immediate attack, and Macdonald's army was routed. Thousands of his new conscripts surrendered or deserted. Hundreds were driven into the river itself. Macdonald took full responsibility for the disaster, though his lack of cavalry and some bad luck were also to blame.
But give him credit. At a time when a lot of guys would try to blame someone else or, try to do CYA mode at that point, this guy owns up to it.
Napoleon certainly continued to respect Macdonald's military judgment. He continued to command 11th Corps and was in the thick of the fighting at Leipzig 2 months later. Macdonald was with the rear guard when the French retreat began and was shocked to see the chaos that engulfed the army. When the Elster Bridge was blown too early, he himself was trapped on the wrong side of the river and just managed to swim to safety under enemy fire.
Could you imagine that? A Marshal of France under fire swimming across the river to try and escape.
Macdonald continued to serve Napoleon as a loyal and reliable commander throughout the 1814 campaign, effectively serving as his deputy at several key moments. Unlike most marshals, Macdonald was never under Napoleon's spell and always spoke his mind to the emperor.
And you know what? That might be part of why Napoleon trusted him so much, because he knew that he could count on Macdonald to tell him the truth at a time when you got a lot of guys that are willing to be a yes man.
In itself was a valuable service, though it sometimes led to heated arguments.
You need, complete aside here, we all need those kinds of people in our lives. People who care about us and are good enough friend to us to tell us the truth when we need to hear it.
Perhaps inevitably, in April, it was Macdonald and Ney who took the lead in confronting Napoleon with the facts of his situation.
Yep.
The war was lost, and he must abdicate. Napoleon named Macdonald as one of the 3 men who would negotiate with the Allies, telling his foreign minister, the Marquis de Caulaincourt, "Macdonald does not like me, but he is a man of his word, of high principles, and he can be relied on."
That's high praise.
In their last meeting, a few days later, Napoleon told Macdonald, "I did not know you well. I was prejudiced against you. I have done so much for so many others who have abandoned me. And you, who owe me nothing, have remained faithful.
That's high praise.
I appreciate your loyalty. Too late."
Wow. And give Napoleon credit here, too. It's tough to acknowledge something like that, especially in one of your darkest moments, which is where he's at this point.
Macdonald was kept on as a military advisor by France's restored Bourbon monarchy. He continued to speak his mind, so much so that Louis XVIII nicknamed him his outspokenness.
I think Macdonald's the guy. I read a story about this where he was having like a meal with the king, and the king asked him what he thought of the revolution, and he praised the French Revolution, which of course had overthrown and eventually executed the king's brother, Louis XVI. And he basically said, if it weren't for the revolution, I never would have gotten the opportunity that I did to rise to be a Marshal of France. And I think the king appreciated his honesty.
During the 100 Days, Macdonald remained loyal to the king and attempted to rally troops to fight against Napoleon.
Interesting.
When he saw this was futile, he escorted the king to safety in Belgium, then returned to Paris, where he refused to meet with Napoleon. After the defeat at Waterloo, he was put in charge of demobilizing the last elements of Napoleon's Grande Armée, and helped many officers to escape arrest by the Bourbons. Macdonald was a methodical, reliable, if unspectacular commander.
My gut, just from what I've heard about him, tells me this is a guy of principle. This is a guy who has a certain set of beliefs. He's loyal. He's brave. And that loyalty, of course, changed. It had been to Napoleon, but then it was to the king. So really, it was just to the state. It was to whoever the rightful ruler of France was, and he was going to be loyal and carry that out as best he could.
But he distinguished himself, above all, by his lack of vanity or personal ambition, his complete loyalty to France, and his willingness to speak his mind, virtues that were all too rare among Napoleon's marshals.
I like him. I like this guy. I'm interested to know more about his background.
7. Marshall Massena.
This is an interesting quote, too. He came alive when surrounded by danger. When defeated, he was always ready to begin again, as if he was in fact, the victor. Some people have that part of their brain that just seems to focus better when the situation is the most dire. Again, I've mentioned Ulysses S. Grant a few times, and a lot of people said this about him, that he seemed to just be laser focused when the situation was desperate and when the heat of battle was on the most. And those are important people to have around you.
André Massena was born in Nice, at that time not technically part of France, but of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia. His father, a shopkeeper, died when he was young, so he ran away to sea. Then at 17, enlisted in the French army. He was quickly made a sergeant, but a commoner could rise no higher in the Royal Army, so after 14 years' service he quit.
Wow.
When the French Revolution began, he re-enlisted in a local volunteer battalion.
There, once again, you have the Revolution providing an opportunity for a guy that was a senior non-com but was going to go no higher than that otherwise.
Massena, supremely self-confident and unfazed by any challenge, was elected to command the battalion and led it with success against the Austrians on the Piedmontese front. Despite his lack of education, he proved an instinctive combat leader. He was soon promoted to brigadier, and after leading a successful attack at the siege of Toulon, was made general of division.
So, I mean, after Toulon, this is when Napoleon gets his big break. This is when a couple other guys get their big break. This is the moment. I mean, this guy went from 14 years in the army, rising no higher than sergeant, to getting elected to command a battalion, and now he's a division commander, all with no formal military education.
He won an impressive victory over the Austrians at Loarno in 1795, and when the Army of Italy's commander, General Scherer, resigned over lack of support from the government in Paris, many expected Massena to replace him. Instead, the job went to the 26-year-old General Bonaparte, 11 years younger and much less experienced than Massena, but with far better political connections.
And the military
Nevertheless,
education.
Napoleon and Massena worked together brilliantly. Massena commanded his advance guard and played a major role in several of his early victories.
And give Massena credit here. If he, as I'm sure he was, aware that he was in line to maybe command this army, and it goes to this young upstart who wasn't even born in France, who's from Corsica, from an Italian family, there could be some bad feelings in there, and there could be an opportunity in his mind maybe to try and sabotage Napoleon, but instead he works well with him and he does what's best.
In reports, Napoleon described Massena as active, tireless, audacious. He won so many battles that Napoleon acclaimed him l'enfant gâté de la victoire, the spoiled child of victory. Massena was, however, notorious for extorting vast sums from the local Italians, often while his own troops went hungry and without pay. In 1798...
So he's not going to be a good political general.
Massena received his first independent command, the Army of Switzerland. The next spring, after French defeats on the Rhine and in Italy, responsibility for the defense of France lay in his hands. Rather than wait to be encircled, he attacked and won a brilliant victory over Austrian and Russian forces at the Battle of Zurich. Rewarded with command of the Army of Italy, Massena led a heroic defense of Genoa in 1800. He was eventually starved into surrender, but his stubborn defense bought Napoleon enough time to cross the Alps and defeat the Austrians at Marengo. Physically exhausted by this last ordeal and surrounded by accusations of corruption, Massena was recalled to Paris and went into semi-retirement.
So I can see whether the accusations of corruption are well-founded or not, when you're constantly kind of looting and pillaging and taking a lot from the people you're occupying. there's a natural tendency to believe, okay, he's probably taken some for himself. This is an accusation that was hurled at Benedict Arnold when he was the military governor of Philadelphia, and it was probably well-founded that he was taking advantage of his position to make himself wealthy.
When he was made a marshal by Napoleon in 1804, he seemed distinctly underwhelmed, and on being congratulated, remarked, "There are 14 of us." But Massena was...
Yeah, but you could look at it the other way, too. There are only 14 of you. You're one of 14 who have been given this highest possible honor within the army.
one of the few marshals who'd proved themselves in independent command, making him a priceless asset to Napoleon.
True.
In 1805, he was recalled to active service and given command of the Army of Italy in the war against the Third Coalition.
This was the army that originally could have gone to him that went to Napoleon instead so many years earlier.
Massena kept Archduke Charles's army busy in Italy, while the Emperor won his great victories at Ulm and Austerlitz.
Which are only possible because he doesn't have to feel like he has to bounce back and forth, which is something Napoleon had to do a lot, was go between different armies. When you can trust a guy like Massena to do the job and to hold your right flank and to deal with the Austrians so that you can focus on the Russians, that's a big deal.
In 1806, Massena oversaw the occupation of the Kingdom of Naples, ordering brutal reprisals against local resistance. In 1807, he commanded 5th Corps in Poland, but his role covering Warsaw meant he missed the major battles of Eylau and Friedland. Later that year, while out hunting with the Emperor and his entourage at Fontainebleau, he was accidentally shot in the face and lost the use of an eye. Napoleon, a notoriously bad shot, was to blame, but
Napoleon shot him in the face? That's a story I wasn't familiar with. That'll put a little, damage to the relationship.
Royal Marshal Berthier claimed responsibility.
Wow. Berthier said it was me.
The war against Austria in 1809 saw Massena back near his best.
How many guys, though, could say, you know what? Napoleon Bonaparte shot me in the face, and I lived to tell the tale.
His corps formed the vanguard for the crossing of the Danube, and fought ferociously to hold the village of Aspern against an overwhelming Austrian onslaught. Massena was everywhere, displaying his usual coolness under fire, and when ordered to retreat, ensured his troops pulled back across the river in good order. The battle was a defeat, but Massena had been superb. Together, he and the Emperor oversaw preparations for the next attempt to cross the Danube 6 weeks later. The Austrians were waiting for them at the Battle of Wagram. Because of a riding accident a few days earlier, Massena had to command his corps from a carriage. He made a fine target for Austrian gunners, but was still able to organize a complex redeployment of his corps at the height of the battle, covered by Marshall Bessieres' cavalry charge. Massena's bold maneuver secured the French left flank and won further praise from Napoleon. Massena, already ennobled as the Duke of Rivoli, received a new title, Prince of Essling,
another prince,
and another less welcome reward, command of French forces for the invasion of Portugal.
So we talked yesterday about, I mused aloud wondering whether or not any of his non-relatives got a title of prince. Well, there you go. And I feel like of the marshals we've talked about so far, probably the most deserving of it.
Massena was deeply reluctant to go and complained bitterly about his appointment. He was showing clear signs of exhaustion and was plagued by rheumatism and bad lungs. When he arrived in Spain, General Foy observed, "He's only 52, but he looks more than 60. He's lost weight and has begun to stoop. His glance, since the accident in which he lost an eye, has lost its keenness." His subordinates, already underwhelmed by his appearance, were outraged that the Marshal also decided to bring along his mistress, poorly disguised as an officer of dragoons.
He disguised his mistress as an officer of dragoons? All right.
The French invasion of Portugal proved a disaster, undone by Wellington's scorched earth tactics, a hostile population and terrain, and Massena's own lethargic leadership. His corps commanders, especially Marshal Ney, were scathing of his conduct. At Busaco, Massena squandered lives with an unnecessary frontal attack on a strong British position. When he reached Lisbon, he found the city protected by new fortifications, the impregnable lines of Torres Vedras. Massena waited outside Lisbon for reinforcements that never came, while sickness and guerrilla raids took their toll on his army. 5 months later, he recrossed the mountains back into Spain, leaving a string of devastated villages behind him.
Boy, the Iberian Peninsula was just the graveyard of careers, wasn't it? So many of these guys ended up having to do duty down there in Spain and Portugal, and it just did not go well for many of them.
The next summer, at Fuentes de Oñoro, Massena attacked Wellington's army once more, and despite much hard fighting, again failed to win a clear victory. He blamed Marshall Bessieres for his lack of support. But the Emperor's patience was at an end. He sent Marshal Marmont to replace Massena, and when they next met, greeted him with the cutting words, "So, Prince of Essling, you are no longer Massena." Massena's health was now in steep decline.
Well, Emperor, you did shoot me in the face. I might be down a little bit and off my game from that point.
He never held a major command again, though he was recalled in 1813 to supervise a military district in southern France. He died after a long illness in 1817. In his prime, Massena was a superb commander, incisive and dangerous. But he was past his best by the time he became a marshal.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, there were enough sparks of his old brilliance to worry his adversaries. The Duke of Wellington once remarked, "When Massena was opposed to me in the field, I never slept comfortably."
That's high praise.
Bessieres, Macdonald, Massena. 20 down, 6 to go.
All right, we'll be back with the final 6 in a few days. Do a couple of these at a time, take a break for a few days. It's not going to be months or anything. We'll be back. Just like to mix it up a little bit, keep people interested. So let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.